Alright, in this video we're just picking up right where we left off. So the first thing to look at is the next group of people who are going to get involved in the Reconstruction process. So we're going to be looking at Congress and how they're intervening. So we've got a lot of laws and a few amendments that are added on at this point. The first law being the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And this law is giving basic rights to blacks. And it's also saying that all people born in the United States are citizens. And so a couple of years later, we get the 14th Amendment, which is basically an extension of the Civil Rights Act. And it's a constitutional backup, or it's the Constitution that is guaranteeing this right to the people. So saying that all citizens have equal protection under the Constitution. So if you're born in the United States, you are a citizen, and you have the Constitution to back up this right and to honor this right. Another little side thing that the 14th Amendment is going to do is that it's going to ban former Confederate politicians from office. But initially, the 14th Amendment fails to receive the 75% needed for state approval, and so at first it doesn't really go anywhere. But the 14th Amendment is going to be important just because if it is ratified, then no future president can come in and take away this naturalization right from essentially African Americans. Because the Civil Rights Act, it sets up that if you're born here, then you're a citizen, but it just being an act, any president in the future can come take that away. The 14th Amendment means no, this is law. If you're born here, you're a citizen here, and the Constitution will back that up and protect you. So looking into how is Congress going to further take over Reconstruction, we've got a couple more military acts. The first one being the Military Reconstruction Act of 1867. This one divides the South up into 5 different military districts, and it assigns each district a federal commander. So we've got the South, we're dividing them up. A commander is in each district, and the job of this commander is to oversee constitutional conventions. So in order for the South to re-enter the Union, we need a new state constitution that includes black suffrage and includes the ratification of the 14th Amendment. And so with this, you're able to come back in, but we need these things to be done before you can. Another couple of acts that are going to be passed by Congress is the Command of Army Act and the Tenure of Office Act, and this is basically going to limit Johnson's military powers, especially when it comes to removing certain people from his cabinet. And so a big thing that comes out of this is Johnson, he's trying to remove Edwin Stanton, the Secretary of War, but Congress says, no, this is now illegal thanks to these 2 acts. And so because Johnson goes ahead and does this anyway, Congress decides that, well, you're breaking the law, so now we have grounds to impeach you and to run an impeachment trial. And so Congress tries to do this, but the impeachment is unsuccessful, and so Johnson is able to remain president throughout his term. So looking into who's going to win the 1868 election, it all comes down to the former General Ulysses S. Grant and the Democratic candidate, which is Seymour. So if we take a look at the map, we know that Grant is going to win the 1868 election. He is all of the blue-colored states. So he wins the overwhelming majority. Seymour has a couple of oddball little places, and then we even have some green territories that are unreconstructed states, so they're not quite ready to vote yet. So we've got Grant as our new president, and then a couple of years later, in 1870, we have the 15th Amendment, which is going to give blacks the right to vote. And more importantly, it gives black the rights to vote. It gives slaves, former slaves, I should say, the right to vote as well. So looking into how blacks voting is going to impact the South. So we've got a couple key things that are going to take place that ultimately leads up to African Americans taking local, state, and national positions in office. So September of 1867, we have black voters outnumbering white voters in 3 states, and this is really because rebels are disenfranchised. So they have certain rights that are taken away from them, and because their rights are taken away, we can have new rights, the rights of the freedmen and African Americans, to come in and kind of assume the role of the former white Southerners. So in South Carolina and Mississippi, we even have black voters who are making up a majority of the electorate. And then in the 2 decades after 1867, we've got Southern blacks taking national office. And then we've got a few little fun facts about this, but the African Americans taking over local, state, and national office, it doesn't last for too long. By 1877, we have all ex-Confederate states returning to a white rule. Looking into how whites are going to resist this, because they're not going to be too happy about this. So By 1866, we have groups forming in southern states to fight for what they are going to call white rights. The major group is going to be the Ku Klux Klan, and they gain a lot of momentum and a lot of memberships from 1868 to 71. And by 1870, we've got 500,000 Klansmen in the South, so they explode. They really grow during that time period. And the goal of the Klansmen is to destroy Republican political organizations by intimidation and physical force. So they're trying to get rid of this idea that African Americans are equal to whites. They want to uphold white superiority and saying, well, blacks are no longer slaves, but that doesn't mean that they're equal to us. And so they try and shut this down by intimidation, by violence. They're going to target black schools, black churches, and even blacks who are running for public office. We have Southern Republican governments who are going to introduce laws that try to ban people from joining organizations that disturb the peace. However, these laws are going to be difficult to enforce. So they're trying to stop this, but they can't do it completely. Looking into some money and how economic reconstruction, how that was successful. So in the South, we're going to have manufacturing increasing and a lot of railroads being rebuilt. However, even though there's this new focus on manufacturing, the South is still not going to be able to keep up the pace of industrial progress that is going on elsewhere. So they're still playing this game of catch-up as far as industrialization goes. In the South, they're short of cash and credit, so they're still remaining largely dependent on cotton. And old plantations are remained. We have blacks who are continuing to do the hard labor, even though they're not technically slaves. By the 1870s, however, cotton is going to surplus worldwide, and so with this, we're going to see a fall in the price of cotton. And we have a lot of small farmers who are going to be trapped in the circle of debt because they owe their landowner money, their landowner owns bankers money, and so they just kind of get trapped in this evil cycle of not being able to pay their debt because cotton prices are down. So looking into the Compromise of 1850, this is typically what officially ends the Reconstruction era as far as history books are concerned. So a quick look first at the presidential election of 1876. It comes down to the Republican candidate Rutherford B. Hayes and the Democratic candidate Samuel Tilden. And there's a little bit of controversy over this election because we have 20 electorate votes across these 4 states that are going to be challenged because we have both sides arguing that there was a mistake in the election or in the voting process. So we're going to have Northerners saying that blacks were not allowed their right to vote. We're going to have Southerners saying that blacks voted twice. So it really gets messy over these 20 votes. And it comes down to Hayes really being successful in the election and saying that if Hayes was given these 20 votes, then he easily would have won. And so Compromise of 1877 is really to settle this dilemma. And so what Congress proposes is that the Democrats need to suck it up and accept Hayes as the president. And if they do that, then Hayes will withdraw troops from the South. Another couple things to make the South happy in accepting Hayes as the president is he should recognize democratic governments, and he would also appoint a Southerner to his cabinet. And that's where we'll stop.